Alright, so I've been doing a lot of thinking about CodePonder and reading your guys' questions and comments about it that have been super helpful, so thank you for that. And I've kind of come to a conclusion that I want to run by you guys. And before I do that, I want to talk about the design a wee bit because we got a mock-up that Vlad created for us, so super psyched about that, and you're looking at it right now. So I have Figma up right here, and he created 3 pages for us. So here is one of them. Here's another one. So I think these are 2 different kind of like home pages or pages where you can see all these different code reviews and you can kind of sort them. And then here's a page that I created, which I'm going to come back to in a second because this kind of spurred my conclusion. And then here's kind of like what the form might look like. So let's come back to this real quick. And by the way, if you want to see and play around with this, this is on the CodePonder repo, the mockups issue. You can click on the Figma link and check it out. Now here is what I was playing around with. So this is something I was just creating. And this page was the page where you kind of view a code review. And I really didn't want to make my own like code review, selecting of text, adding comments, handling pull requests and different Git things, all that jazz. Didn't want to handle it at all. So I was like, all right, what can I do to avoid that? And I was like, all right, let's link to GitHub and send them to GitHub. But I think it's kind of awkward sending them to GitHub. So I create a code review, I click on the card, I come to like a screen that looks like this. So here's just a dummy one that I made. So here's for the Django project. Here's like the name, description for it, and then some like tags that I added. And like I was thinking, all right, well, we might have like some questions that we want to ask. They're like general about the code base, and then someone could come in and answer them and then say they completed the code review. And also they could go click on the link to go to GitHub, fork it or something, and then add comments there. That whole process is kind of awkward. We don't really need this whole CodePonder thing here with the comments because really you could just go to GitHub and make an issue about it. And you could go to GitHub and you can add comments there and do pretty much the whole code review there. And so I was thinking, well, that's really awkward, and really GitHub is a pretty nice platform to do this on. But the one thing that I feel like is missing is a focus on the code review part. But more importantly, it has a pretty good code review though. But really there's no discovery. Like if I want, let's say I have a GitHub repo, where do I go and tell everyone, hey, I would like code reviews on it? There's not really a place. So that's kind of what I want to set up. And I don't think there's another way to go about doing this rather than us implementing our own kind of code review thing. And what I mean by that is here's what I imagine the process looking like, at least the code review, how the code review would happen. So I would still do the same thing that I talked about. I would create a code review by basically linking it to a GitHub repo. By the way, great suggestion. Instead of like me having a URL that I pass in, since we're going to be using OAuth with our GitHub account, or we're going to log in with GitHub and using OAuth, we're going to have access to that person's repos, or at least we can ask for access. So what we can do is we actually know all the repos for that user, and so we can actually just get the repo name and get repos based on that rather than you pasting in the URL. Anyway, so after the user has picked the repo that they want a code review on, this is like how a GitHub repo would look. So we would have something similar to this GitHub view. So we would have a list of folders and list of files, and then we would have a description, we have tags, we'd have the name, all that stuff. So very similar view here. But where things get different is when we click on files. So let's say I go to my Docker Compose. Basically what we would add is be able to select the code and add comments to it. Now think about this from the 2 perspectives. Now you can do something very similar to this in GitHub when you do pull requests. And so it would start similar to that, but I think I want to start there and then add more on top of it. But basically how I think it would set up is instead of really starting from a diff. So usually on GitHub, you would add a pull request, and you can see the diff of all the files the user has changed, and then you can add comments. I should have pulled up a pull request, but oh well. Instead of doing that, what I'm thinking is, all right, I want my CodePonder project to be reviewed. So what I'm going to go and do is go to a couple files and be like, all right, highlight this text and then add a comment. Do you think this is a good way to add caddy to my Docker Compose? And then, all right, we added a little, I'm thinking we call them like flags or something. Then I come over here, I click on my server, we go to my tsconfig, and then I'm saying like, all right, guys, should I include any other thing or whatever? And I add another comment here. And so then I create basically like what I'm calling is a list of flags, and I can see all the areas that the user has comments about. And so then what it would be is at each place you just have a comment thread where people can discuss the questions that the user has, and then make it really easy to kind of like to go between the comments and to see them and kind of navigate between them. Anyway, so that's the idea, is basically kind of implementing what GitHub has, and then adding more on top of that, and then creating kind of a place that makes sense to collaborate into code review. But it's not a code review based on Git diffs. It's a code review based on questions that the user has about their code that they add flags about, at least to start. So anyway, that's kind of like an idea I'm thinking about maybe pursuing with it, and kind of how that would work. So when you come to this page, what it would look like is you'd actually do the interaction here. So you would actually go through the files and everything would stay on CodePonder that way. So I'm curious what you guys think about this. If you like this idea, or if you have any thoughts, would love to hear your feedback. My plan is I'm gonna like think about this a little bit more and see if this makes sense, and then see what you guys have to say about it, and then if it makes sense, then kind of like create a mock-up based on that and start working on that. Everything else I think would stay very similar though, so I still see us having like kind of a home page and grabbing, sorting by the languages and being able to find stuff. The difference would be, instead of what I was thinking, like these question things, do it more code related.